The New Orleans Saints' path to dominating the 2026 NFL Draft is wide open.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson. And on today's episode, we're taking a look at 3 paths to the perfect draft for the New Orleans Saints, how they can find another sure thing pathway, why one sure thing pathway is through wide receiver, and why the top sure thing pathway is, of course, going to include running back Jeremiyah Love, who might be one of my favorite players in this year's NFL draft. And we'll scratch the might be from that. So let's get to it. Look, I was asked a great question in our Locked On Saints Discord from Jordyn about what my perfect draft would be today, right? Starting now. Obviously, the combine's on the way. That's going to change some things like that. And I figured, there's actually a few different ways to perfect drafts for the New Orleans Saints. Because to me, the perfect draft, you can't predict. The perfect draft has to be seen 4 years later, 3 years later, but you can give yourself the most swings at the plate, right? The best possible swings at the plate. And so for me, that was my pathway to trying to find the best possible draft or mock draft for New Orleans. So I've got 2 mock drafts here, and then we'll make a slight adjustment to wrap up the show to where we're effectively going to look at 3 7-round mock drafts today. And then I want you to tell me which one you like the best. You can do that by joining our Discord. You can do that by hitting me up if you are an All Access member via text, or of course you can leave a comment, find me on social media. Ample ways to contribute here and let me know what you think. So let's get to it here. I want to start off with the running back draft, I'll call it, right? Where we go running back in the first round. So this was starting off at round 1, pick 8, running back Jeremiyah Love out of Notre Dame. No surprise here, right? We've toyed with this scenario a ton. A lot of people are toying with this scenario. Good fit for the New Orleans Saints who need another jolt on offense. Then round 2, pick 42, I went with a guy that we recently talked about, slot cornerback Keionte Scott out of Miami. I said the other day, if I'm Brandon Staley and I'm on the board at pick 42 and Keionte Scott out of Miami is still on the board and the team lost Keionte Taylor in free agency, I'm standing on the table, I'm stomping my feet, I'm pounding my fist. I want Keionte Scott on my team because he's just as physical as Keionte Taylor. He's just as high energy as Keionte Taylor. He's going to be as versatile as Keionte Taylor. I think some of that you have to learn at the next level. Keionte was a perfect example of that, just being a student of the game and wanting to do more and more and more and more. But if Keionte gets the opportunity to settle down in an outside corner role somewhere and earn outside corner money, obviously that's going to be very hard to pass up. If he leaves, Keionte Scott could be a good fit if the Saints don't feel like they have that answer on the roster already, which they might. Let's go round 3, pick 73. I wanted a wide receiver here. I didn't want to wait much longer, right? I want weapons on this offense. We talked about how important that was the other day. So I went with wide receiver Zachariah Branch out of Georgia in the 3rd round at pick 73. I think he's going to go higher than this once he runs in the combine, but for right now, this is a perfect swing at the plate for you to get another one of those home run hitter, yards after catch receivers, and a guy that can also be a returner for you, because don't forget the Saints are kind of down returners right now with having traded away Rashid Shaheed last year. Then getting into round 4, I doubled up on 2 guys that are going to help me with protection, right? I added the weapons. I got Jeremiyah Love. I got a big weapon over on defense. I got another weapon at wide receiver. Now, let me fortify the offense a little bit. So I went with guard DJ Campbell out of Texas. I also, by the way, really like Auburn interior offensive lineman Jeremiah Wright at this area. Both of those guys very dominant, I don't want to say dominant because that puts a large expectation on them, but very physical, very domineering in terms of the way that they like to play. Let me say it that way. And then I followed that up by going with Texas A&M tight end Nate Burkholzer, who gives you a really, really solid run blocker at tight end, who can also run some routes for you. He was impressive in some opportunities that he got to run routes in all-star games, things like that. And so giving him, putting him in here opposite a Juwan Johnson who can handle the route running, the pass catching, all that. But you have somebody in Burkholzer who could potentially come in and help you as a blocker, run routes, or sit back and develop behind Maliki Matavao if the Saints bring back Foster Moreau, or if they end up bringing in another tight end, you have an opportunity to develop there. Round 5, I went back to the playmakers, right? So I went with another pass catcher. Yes, I'm doubling up at wide receiver. What do you want to do? Fight about it? I doubt it. I'm going with Jacoby Lane out of USC. I went with the smaller, faster, shiftier, quicker yards after catch wide receiver earlier with Zachariah Branch. Now let me go and get a bigger bodied, or at least bigger, like taller guy that can have that kind of presence for me. So I went with Jacoby Lane. This is somebody that the Saints got an opportunity to see during the Senior Bowl as well. So out of USC, I went with him. I'm not going to use official measurements because the combine measurements are always slightly different. We know how that works, but he's around that sort of 6'3", 6'4" area. So I like having another one of those guys with some athleticism as well, by the way, on the roster. Also in round 5, again, I wanted to stick with production here. I went with edge rusher, Malachi Lawrence. Malachi Lawrence is a guy that I really, really like in this draft. You all know that. But he gives you another one of those stand-up, speedy edge rushers that can win with bend, that can run the edge, that's not a liability in the run game out of UCF. I really, really like what it is that he could potentially bring as a rotational piece along with Carl Granderson opposite Chase Young, and possibly with Cam Jordyn involved in that mix as well. At this moment, we don't know what the future of Cam Jordyn and the New Orleans Saints are. That's part of what we're going to start learning about probably at the combine, because that's kind of when those conversations start to happen, running into agents and talking to representatives and things like that. We see that across the NFL all the time. And then finally, round 7, pick 189. I wanted another piece to the defensive line here, right? We've gone running back, we've hit wide receiver twice. I added another tight end, did some things here to help out on the offensive line and in protection, added an edge rusher. So now let me go to the interior of the defensive line, and I'll go with Xzavian Harris, the big-bodied defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. Six, I think he's like 6'7", 300 and like 20-ish, 330-ish pounds. Might even be in the 340 area. But like, this is just one of those guys who reminds me of I can't remember his name, but there was a defensive tackle that I absolutely loved in last year's draft. He was like 6'8". I think he ended up in Buffalo, if I remember correctly. And I really, really liked him as an A-gap player in Brandon Staley's defense. I look at Xzavian Harris the same way, right? Big, tall, can muck up things in the middle of the defense, can take on double teams, all those kinds of things. Like, just to be a guy that maybe open up some opportunities for some of the other guys around him. I think having him and then Brian Brzee at that 3-4 defensive end, you have Malachi Lawrence on one side, you have Chase Young on the other side, you have another player that you plugged in there as the other 3-4 DN. Maybe that's Carl Granderson, maybe that's Cam Jordyn, whatever. And then you just let those guys get after the quarterback. I think that works pretty well for you. So quick recap: Jeremiyah Love, running back out of Notre Dame; Miami cornerback Keionte Scott; Zachariah Branch, the shifty wide receiver out of Georgia. Then we went protection with DJ Campbell and Nate Burkhercher. And then we go with Jacoby Lane out of USC, Malachi Lawrence out of UCF, and then Xzavian Harris, the interior defensive lineman out of Ole Miss. So that's my perfect, hey, here's your best swings at the plate or opportunities at the plate starting at running back. But running back isn't always considered a sure thing, especially in the first round. Oftentimes, though, wide receiver is. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Since we're talking mock drafts here, how about drafting your favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy? It's the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft. Let's get to it. Look, 5 Hour Energy has a variety of different flavors, 17, always something for everyone. And they've got some rotating specialty flavors that hit every now and then. By the way, when I say that they hit, I mean that they hit. Look, I have a couple of top flavors already. Cherry is one of my favorites. Blue raspberry is one of my favorites. I'm a blue ras guy, like in more ways than one. I really love anything blue raspberry flavored typically. And so I love those two flavors. But to me, there's like some sleepers around as well to be considered. I mean, people love the tropical punch flavor. And so I need to give that one a shot as well. So there's some sleepers in there, but I'm a big fan for cherry, blue raspberry. Let me know what your favorite 5 Hour Energy flavors are. So you can find your favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots because they're available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. If you're hiring, remember this, because it's all you need to remember. Indeed is all that you need. Between workplace chaos, deadlines that are stacking up, an inbox that might be overflowing, especially those of us coming back from Mardi Gras, it happens. The one position that you don't want to be in is a position where you're not filling the position that you need to fill because everything just got lost in time. You don't have to worry about that when it comes to Indeed sponsored jobs. In this minute that I'll spend talking to you, companies just like yours will have already made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed's data worldwide. That's why you need to try Indeed sponsored jobs today. So go and check them out. Our listeners, by the way, will get $75 in Indeed sponsored job credit to help you in your job get the premium positioning that it deserves over at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now, and then you can support our show by saying that we sent you. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. New hire? Well, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, family, continuing on here as we take a look at another potential perfect New Orleans Saints mock draft. But this time we're leading off with a little bit more of a surefire position, a sure thing position, air quotes on sure thing, because we're going to lead off with wide receiver instead of running back. Look, many people will have their issues with any team drafting a running back in the top 10, any team drafting a running back in the first round for some folks. But we have to take into consideration that like today's NFL requires multiple running backs, it requires multiple tight ends. It's not the same 11 personnel NFL that it was 2 or 3 years ago. And so I do think that the running back position has been creeping back into the first round, creeping back into the top 15 for a reason. And I do think that that will continue here this year with Jeremiyah Love. And I don't think that that would be a bad swing for the New Orleans Saints at all. But I do understand that some teams might not agree with that. And those are the opinions that matter. And so those opinions, though, might say, hey, wide receiver is a really good premium position to target within the top 15. And if you look at the Saints' recent history within the top 15, post Marcus Davenport, things have worked out pretty well for them. Chris Olave was 11th overall. Taliesin Fuaga was 14th overall. Last year, Kelvin Banks Jr. was 9th overall. All three of those players, wide receiver, tackle, premier positions, right? Those premier positions we usually talk about: wide receiver, tackle, quarterback, cornerback, edge rusher. That's pretty much it, right? Like those are the premium positions or premier positions typically when you're talking about the NFL draft. So let's lean in on that a little bit. Round 1, pick 8, wide receiver, Jordyn Tyson, Arizona State, assuming that the medicals check out. If the medicals don't check out over the course of the combine, over the course of the top 30 visits that he'll get with various teams, including potentially the New Orleans Saints, then I think round 1, pick 8, wide receiver, Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. No issue with that at all. I think both of these wide receivers are absolutely perfect for what it is that the New Orleans Saints might look to add at the position. I just think that Jordyn Tyson is a very, very dominant presence. And when he's healthy, he has been able to show that. He makes some of the most incredible catches you'll watch on tape. He is somebody that is never afraid of his matchup, and he is somebody that has consistently come through in the clutch. And I can honestly say a lot of those same things about Carnell Tate. I just really, really like what Jordyn Tyson does at all 3 phases, or not 3, but in all the several phases of being a wide receiver. His catch radius, his route running, his yards after catch ability, all of that, he checks every single box. So I'm going to go with Jordyn Tyson. You can go with Carnell Tate. I'm going to wait and see what the medicals say before I start showing prospect fatigue when it comes to Jordyn Tyson. And so I'm going to go there. But whichever round 1 wide receiver you like, that one at round 1, pick 8. Round 2, pick 42. I went to the edge here with Zion Young out of Missouri. He's going to be able to stand up. He's going to be able to put his hand in the dirt. He is just fierce and high motor, is able to go out there, very disruptive, all that. Got to see him up close in person at the Senior Bowl. Absolutely love what I saw from him there. Then I'm sticking on the defensive line. So I went from big investment at premier position, and then I'm waiting now to add more layers to the tools, right? So we're going to get to more of that in a little bit. But he was on the board at round 3, pick 73, and I couldn't pass him up. Interior defensive lineman Dominique Orange out of Iowa State. We're talking 6'2", 6'3", 320 plus pounds. Another stopgap, plug him into the middle of your defense, prosper type of player. I'm all about Dominique Orange. Now, the Saints just drafted a 3rd round defensive tackle last year in Vernon Broughton, so they might not feel that they need to go and grab another interior defensive line in this year's draft because it's kind of like a free agency addition when it comes to Vernon Broughton, whose season ended in his first game, which was the 2nd game of the year. So could potentially pass on that. If I did, I'd probably go right to running back at this point, but I'll explain that a little bit more in just a second. Then round 4, I went with 2 more pieces that I want to add for the run game. Number 1, running back Kaytron Allen out of Penn State. At this point, I'm probably not finding a bell cow running back. There's probably only 2 or 3 of those in this year's NFL draft, but this is a good complementary piece if the team has hung on to Alvin Kamara up to this point, which I expect will be the case. He and Kaytron Allen, or Kaytron Allen and Alvin Kamara, could be a really good 1-2 punch, and then get Devin Neal folded in. The time the Saints, I say this all the time, when the Saints won the Super Bowl back in the day, they had 3 running backs, not just 2, right? They had Pierre Thomas, they had Reggie Bush, but they also had Mike Bell. And so you want that rotation of maybe a trio of running backs, at least a duo of running backs. But if you can get that trio with Devin Neal, I think that works really well too. And I don't mean to discount Kendre Miller or Audric Estime. They will have their opportunities in that rotation as well. Then to further help out the offensive line, I went with Bo Stevens, the interior offensive lineman out of Iowa. Again, I think the best way to address the interior of the offensive line for New Orleans is via free agency. Find NFL players that can do NFL things for you at the NFL level for your NFL team when it comes to that position, because offensive line is not very impressive at the collegiate level. Just going to be real. And a lot of that is because the moment that some team finds an athletic tackle, they want to move in the tight end. When a team finds an athletic interior offensive lineman, they want to flip him over to the other side of the line, make him a defensive tackle, so on and so forth. Like, it's about winning games, not developing talent at the college level now because of all the money that's invested in it, which I have no issue with at all. And so, but what it does mean is that your evaluation should change at the next level. And so anytime, in my opinion, you're drafting an interior offensive lineman in the draft, first round, second round, third round, or later, you're drafting somebody to develop. So hopefully you'll have gone to free agency before then at that point. In the 5th round, wanted to get back to getting some weapons here. So I got a defensive weapon first, Jalen Kilgore out of South Carolina. Great nickel corner that you can plug in. Not Keionte Scott, but a strong nickel corner in this year's draft that you can plug in. I'd put him and like Bud Clark kind of in the same place, the safety out of TCU. And then staying in round 5, pick 170, tight end Tanner Cazio out of Houston, 6'6", 6'7", 250 pounds, great pass catcher, good red zone threat, can be that for you immediately, can develop more as the time goes on. Somebody that can be a pass catcher for you when on the field, somebody that can also be a blocker for you when on the field. And then I wrapped up in round 7 with safety, Isaiah Wacobia out of SMU, another chess piece guy. You can move him around, good versatility. The safety room, like I mentioned the other day, is not a position where I see need for New Orleans, but it doesn't mean that you can't add competition and add talent there, even if this is somebody just going to wind up on your practice squad for a little bit, bring some competition for guys like Elliot Davison and others that are on the practice squad. So that's what I like about that one. So again, round 1, I went with Jordyn Tyson, wide receiver at Arizona State. Zion Young out of Missouri comes to us in round 2. Dominique Orange, the interior defensive lineman out of Iowa State in round 3. Round 4, we go run game. Kaytron Allen, the running back out of Penn State, as well as Bo Stevens, the offensive lineman out of Iowa. Round 5, we go back to weapons. Jalen Kilgore, South Carolina corner, as well as tight end Tanner Cazio out of Houston. And then we wrap up with safety Isaiah Wacobia out of SMU, versatile chess piece type player, good special teamer for you as well in round 7. Now, this isn't the only sure thing way to go. Let's go 4 rounds next. And I'm going to show you how the Saints could capitalize by going even edge rusher first, because there are some really good ways to go with the most sure thing possible in the first round. Let's get to that as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy. 100% online. You get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. So there's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints don't have to go weapon first in order to hit a sure thing draft. And look, I think that this is a really important thing to consider. What if the Saints go edge rusher in the first round? And everyone just cringed, I know, because Marcus Davenport was a failure. Peyton Turner, that pick didn't work. I get it. I understand. But the Saints could very well do that. And there's a couple of different reasons why, right? Like when we talk about sure things, we can't say sure thing in terms of draft pick. We can't say sure thing in terms of player who pans out. We don't know that until 3-4 years down the line. But what we can measure is sure thing not in result, but sure thing in process. And the sure things in the process in this year's draft are abundant within the top 10. Jeremiyah Love, to me, is a sure thing in terms of process, right? Guy who is productive, guy who is healthy, guy who is on the field, guy who is game-breaking, guy who could take over a game, guy who is a playmaker, guy who's a game, there's all this. And so, sure thing in terms of process there. Sure thing in terms of process when it comes to Ruben Bain Jr., when it comes to the edge rusher out of Miami. Sure thing in terms of process when it comes to Caleb Downs, the safety out of Ohio State, who might be the best defensive player in this draft. Some people would say the best player in this draft. The wide receivers, Jordyn Tyson, it could be a sure thing in terms of process if the medicals check out, right? That would be a part of that process. If the medicals don't check out, not a sure thing, move on. Carnell Tate, sure thing in terms of process already, in my opinion. So the thing about the sure thing idea or the perfect draft idea at this point, before even the combine has happened, is really what's your perfect draft in terms of giving yourself the best opportunities to hit, right? Who are the players who give you the highest hit percentage based on what we've seen on tape already? So that's kind of been the theme of today's show. I want to continue that, but I want to start with edge rusher. Because I think people are afraid of the idea of edge rusher because 2 edge rushers went bad, therefore no edge rusher can ever go well. And I get that, I understand that, but that's not really the way the NFL works, right? A lot of quarterbacks don't pan out in the first round. Tyler Shuck is panning out so far from the second round. We can't blanket that statement at all, right? No one's monolithic in terms of their representation of their entire position group, right? And so looking beyond that, one other sure thing player for me is Texas Tech's David Bailey. Fantastic edge rusher, tied for the lead in the nation with 14.5 sacks. Gets in there in terms of being strong in the run game, several tackles for a loss that he added throughout his career as well. Absolute game wrecker in some cases, wears absolutely no swag at all and no drip whatsoever, and goes out there and balls out like crazy as a part of that incredible Texas Tech defense. Guys like Jacob Rodriguez, Romello Height, and others all a part of that as well. So for me, if you're going to go for a sure thing, but you're not going to go for the weapon, go for the edge rusher. And for me, the edge rusher in this case is David Bailey. So let's start our quick 4-round mock draft as we wrap up the show here with David Bailey at round 1, pick 8 out of Texas Tech. Can you still add weapons? Yes, 100% you can. Again, we appreciate you very much making us your first listen and being an everydayer. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club. It's an all-access member. We're going to do film studies on a lot of these different players. I'm getting started on that grind again today. I still have that Jalen Polk film study to finish up as well. So come on through, check us out, click the link in the description, or head over to lockedonsaints.supercast.com. So we're starting off with David Bailey at round 1, pick 8. Round 2, pick 42. I'm going to go with a little bit of an underrated wide receiver here, but I am going to go wide receiver. I could go Elijah Surratt. I could go Chris Brazzell. I can go with some of these guys that are kind of the bigger names in this area. But I'm going to go with Indiana's Omar Cooper, the other guy, opposite Elijah Surratt. I like the versatility. You can move him around. You can play him in the slot. You can play him outside. He's got some deep threat ability. He's also really good in terms of his in-breaking outs in the middle of the field. He's a good route runner, all that. I like him. I also really like Deion Burks, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma. I constantly mix the two names up, but I got it. But Burks out of Oklahoma, who I think is going to have a fantastic showing at the combine, and that's going to end up boosting him quite a bit. But I'm going to go with Omar Cooper here in round 2. But again, plug your favorite wide receiver in this range in here. It's fine. Round 3, I like going running back in round 3 in this case because I don't have to go edge rusher. I don't have to go wide receiver here. So I like going running back at this range because there are some good running backs here. Jonah Coleman out of Washington. Damon Claiborne out of, is he Georgia Tech? I think he's Georgia Tech. Damon Claiborne, though, another running back. And one of the things that I like about him is, I like his name. Burke's perfect for New Orleans. But anyway, Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame is who I'm going to go with in this case. He's going to be in this range. He might be a round 2 guy by the time that it's all said and done. But he's one of the 3 guys that I'm like, okay, you need to know this name because they're overshadowed by the guys that are up ahead of them. There's 3 guys like that. Jadarian Price is one of them, who's overshadowed, of course, by Jeremiyah Love at Notre Dame. Omar Cooper, a guy that we just highlighted, often overshadowed by Elijah Surratt in terms of people's conversations. But then also Akeem Messidor, the fantastic edge rusher out of Miami, who's undeniably overshadowed by Reuben Bain Jr., who's one of those sure thing with the process guys. And then finally, round 4, I wrap up here looking at Bud Clark, the TCU safety, but I'm not drafting him to be at safety. I'm drafting him if I lose Keionte Taylor. I'm bringing him in to compete at star, right? And look, the Saints might feel like they already have that position handled. They've got Jonas Sanker. They have Isaiah Stallbird. They have Beanie Bishop. They've got Quincy Riley that they could try there. They could try Julian Blackmon there or keep Julian Blackmon as a true free safety role and then move Jonas Sanker down into the star position. So many different things that you can do there. But if the Saints feel like they don't have the answer for that in the building, then Bud Clark is a guy that makes a lot of sense. I did have somebody ask me the other day if I thought that LSU's Harold Perkins would be a good investment for the star position. No. And then the other pick in round 4 that I really like is now going protection, now helping your interior offensive line. DJ Campbell out of Texas, Bo Stevens out of Iowa, Jeremiah Wright out of Auburn, and perhaps one of my favorites, Pat Coogan out of Indiana. All those guys are expected to be somewhere in this range as of right now, before the combine, before the top 30 visits and all these other things, subject to change. But those guys are all expected to be in this area too. Draft Pat Coogan, let's say. So you end up with David Bailey, Omar Cooper Jr., Jadarian Price, running back out of Notre Dame, Bud Clark, the TCU safety, and Pat Coogan, the center / I'm going to move him to guard at the next level out of Indiana. It's pretty good first 5 selections in the first 4 rounds. So just goes to show, there's a lot of different pathways to sure thing, as long as your process is right. And the Saints have every opportunity, whether going running back, whether going wide receiver, whether going edge rusher, Caleb Downs, whether going safety, to make sure that they're putting themselves in position to follow up that 2025 draft class with a fantastic one in 26. All right, family, time for a little bit of lagniappe here as we wrap up today's episode. Thanks so much for making it to this point in the episode. Always trying to give you a little something extra when you make it all the way through. The Las Vegas Raiders have hired their wide receivers coach. And you might say, oh, Ross, this isn't a Raiders show. Who cares? Your boy Q, Locked on Raiders, he does that. Well, it's impactful for the Saints because that was kind of the one last open position that I was watching for the Saints to potentially have one of their coaching staff members leave. Keith Williams is a very desirable wide receiver coach across the league. He's very good at what he does. He's very innovative. Players love him. Players that he coached and worked with in college still work with him today over the course of the offseason, as opposed to working with new coaches or their own coaches and things like that. And so I highlight that because with the idea that Clint Kubiak was taking over as head coach, former Saints offensive coordinator, Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks, now head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Andrew Janocko was taking over as offensive coordinator, former quarterback coach here in New Orleans, Super Bowl winning quarterback coach with the Seattle Seahawks. And even Rick Dennison, who was a senior offensive assistant here, was, I think, the run game coordinator in Seattle, if I recall correctly, went over to be the run game coordinator in Las Vegas. And so I was like, okay, so who's the one coaching staff member that remains from Clint Kubiak's days here in New Orleans that could potentially fall into an open role, right? Not fall into, he would earn, but you know what I mean? Could be considered for an open role. And Keith Williams was the one guy. Instead, they hired Nate Azzani from Pittsburgh. That now opens up a position in Pittsburgh, but I don't think it's one that Keith Williams is going to be interested in. So I think the Saints coaching staff is all of a sudden very safe, right? Pittsburgh tried to poach a couple, Scott Tolzien as well as Chase Hazlitt. They did get Jari Evans, who is the assistant O-line coach, but the Saints O-line coach is still in place in Brendan Nugent. Maybe they bring in another assistant O-line coach. We'll see. Maybe they go the same route they went with Jari, right? Bring somebody in as a training camp assistant, and then you can keep them on throughout the season if you want to. So, or training camp intern, excuse me. So we'll see which way the Saints end up going at that spot. But for the most part, the Saints coaching staff is exactly the same on offense, on defense, on special teams. On special teams, that's going to raise some question marks. I get that. But in terms of like development of your quarterback, continuing the development of your offense, your defense, and all that, like it seems like everyone's going to still be in place, which is a big win for New Orleans. All right, fam, coming up later on today, we're starting our scouting series with both the draft and free agency. So later on today, we'll have a scouting report for Carnell Tate for you. And then tomorrow, we're taking a look at 3 key free agent targets for New Orleans. We appreciate you very much, as always, making this a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, Nola. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust me, that nation, I'll holla at you.